I can't wait to be like completely
One of the
wrong
main
on all these
improvements
things.
is that you now get
Might be worth it. Pure JLS will be worthless next league. Wouldn't think that either. I mean, I don't know. Rory seems very in tune with like what Betrayal was, because anytime we asked him a question, he was able to answer like a lot of the very specific stuff. But I think the thing that he was really, again, I didn't want to like pursue this topic because we talked about it pretty extensively, but I think overall what I came with was that at the end of the day, they're looking at Betrayal as like whole Betrayal being how much shit is it rewarding me across the board. Shit that I can sell, shit that is useful to me, shit that I can generate wealth off of. But the reason why people don't like their board being reset is because they specify their board to the thing that they're looking to accomplish, and they personalize the Betrayal experience. And by doing Katarina, you deny yourself being able to focus on the thing that you're looking to accomplish from the entire mechanic. And more than likely, that one thing that you want is only obtainable by only ever doing Delirium, by only ever doing Betrayal. And so, yeah, is that thing that you're doing specifically less rewarding across the board? Probably, but the fact that you can personalize it is very important, even if it's less rewarding. But to them, Betrayal is just this like cash cow that they need to give more juice so that people can say, okay, yeah. But you can't bypass what you need from Betrayal unless you trade with other players, which is a fucking nightmare in the first place anyway. That's like, yeah, I mean, would it be really cool if I could at any point trade like an Elrond craft for 5 Exalted Orbs? I guess if I need Exalted Orbs, but if I need Elrond crafts, I'm gonna go for the Elrond crafts, and that's the important part, right? And so that's like the core thing where Betrayal works on paper, but yeah, these changes don't make sense from how Betrayal is actually used. Unless somebody just really likes Betrayal and they're just looking to make as much money off of it as possible. Then yeah, this change is fantastic, right? But I just don't feel like that's Betrayal for most people, but maybe that's just too much of my SSF point of view bleeding through.
That must be unveiled one at a time via
But then simultaneously, just to address what they were talking about, where like, yeah, modifying your board as much as possible, as frequently as possible, is like the core element of the mechanic. I do agree with that part. It does suck that players get their board to like a certain state and then they do everything to preserve that state. That part definitely sucks, and it goes against the idea of Betrayal. But like, preserving the integrity of the board versus having a system that benefits individual character progression, man, yeah, fuck the integrity of the board, you know? Give me personalized progression. That's what I care about the most.
The powerful ones that unveil.
But again, maybe it's my SSF ideas about the game like bleeding through to my perspective, and maybe it doesn't actually apply like to the player base as a whole, right? Yeah, but you can definitely do some memes.
Apply to the bottom half of your life pool. Additionally, a portion of incoming hit damage that affects the lower half of your life pool is spread out over time rather than being applied instantly.
No point in running low life if you're gonna flask above low life. Yeah, but you don't need to run this for low life. You can run it for the damage prevention. So essentially, if you're able to keep your HP at 100%, this is adding 63% more life to your build, which is pretty nutty. Nah? How is it nah? Damage prevention is only lower half? Yeah, and you need to deplete your lower half to not die. When taking damage from hits, 40% of life loss below half life. Oh yeah, you're right. It does say below. Yeah, you're right. It does say below half life. Then what is the purpose of this? Like, why make it so that you can go above? To get one shot above? Yeah, but it's so like... It's a lot of effort. There has to be something to it. Adrenaline? Yeah, I mean, I guess there's stuff like that, but... Yeah, I mean, a big hit, but man, it's just so much effort, you know? To make that actually functional. So much downtime with how much HP you have now versus
Corrupted blood
less.
stacks up with each hit, causing more and more physical damage over time.
Draw your own blood to power a buff, letting you inflict the corrupting blood debuff on enemies you hit, dealing physical damage over time for a shorter second duration. The buff duration will be refreshed if you spend enough life before it expires. Deals 8% base physical damage per second. Base duration is 6 seconds. Base secondary duration is 1 second. Buff duration is refreshed after you spend a total of 26 life. Triggering the skill still requires paying its cost. You inflict the corrupting blood debuff on enemies you hit, dealing physical damage over time for a shorter secondary duration. Draw your own blood to power a buff, letting you inflict the corrupting blood debuff on enemies you hit, dealing physical damage over time for a shorter secondary duration. The buff duration will be refreshed if you spend enough life before it expires. But then... For shorter second... So what is the main duration? It's the... Oh, it has like its own buff thing, I guess. Is that what it is? I guess that's what it is. You just like put on the buff and then the secondary duration is actually the corrupting blood. Yeah, it's like Blood Rage. Because they're both level 16. Cold Snap is 26. And this is 8. And on single target, it's like 4 times the damage. But, I mean, 10 attacks is a lot. I mean, do you have to do 10 attacks or does it inflict it? Letting you inflict the corrupting blood debuff on enemies you hit. Trigger the skill. Buff duration is refreshed after you spend a total of 26. But this is for the total buff duration. So how do you refresh the secondary? If you keep hitting a thing every second? It refreshes the debuff? Does it refresh the debuff or does it refresh the buff? How would it make sense if it refreshes the debuff? It refreshes the debuff every hit. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But if you're not hitting the thing for a second, all the debuff stacks drop off, right? No, the enemy in the video not losing. Yeah, you're right. It actually is up for a long time. Maybe you can extend it with duration, like bleed duration or something. I mean, they're adding. They said that they're changing bleed nodes.
Stacks up with each hit, causing more and more physical damage over time. When you have consumed a certain amount of life to cast skills from your life pool, the buff's duration refreshes. Essentially, as long as you're consuming life to use skills, you'll be causing damage over time to stack on enemies. Be careful though. The X sanks your life pool, the buff damage over time. When you have consumed a certain amount of life to cast skills from your life pool, the buff's duration refreshes. Essentially, as long as you're consuming life to use skills, you'll be causing damage.
I mean, also says enemies you hit. So can't you like throw one bolt lightning and it's just fucking 10 stacks instantly and done? This seems really, really strong. Like, obviously we don't know what the end gem is. And the cost is pretty high because the cost is 78 life on level 1. Buff duration is refreshed after you spend a total of 26 life. Triggering the skill still requires paying its cost. But then does mana cost increase the cost of this? Because if that's the case, then it's kind of painful. I mean, this is non-linked, But this
Damage over time
guy,
stack on enemies. Be careful though.
I mean,
Actually,
split
as long
arrow
as
would
you're
hurt him
consuming
a
life to
lot,
use skills,
and
you'll
it
be
doesn't
causing
seem to hurt
damage
him a lot at all. So I think the life cost is like a static amount. But then buff duration is refreshed. A total of 26 life. The power of buff letting you inflict corrupting blood. So you have to find a way to... Okay, so it uses your skills life cost. So your skill needs to be using probably the new support gem, right? That is like a blood magic gem and it gives damage over time. But even then, yeah, this is just ridiculously strong. Like, this is insanely strong. Like, broken. This is even good for a winter orb. Guess one winter orb with like mass duration stacking? You just hit the guy 5 times every single cast? You fucking clear the map by just running through it. Like, I don't know. This is so much damage. Unless it doesn't scale deeper into the game, because they're assuming that, like, it needs its early game to be strong because you don't have a way. Like, it doesn't scale linearly. It just starts dropping off later on because early on you don't have that many ways of hitting them up multiple times. It is just so strong. No, you pay 78 life to cast it. But this is the way, like, yeah, Blood Rage is as a buff, right? And this is the cost of the ability that you're using to hit the guy to refresh it. You don't even have to have this. You'd have to just recast this every, yeah, however long. I mean, this isn't even a big deal. Triggering the skill still requires paying its cost. Yeah. So you don't have to spend life to cast it. You can cast it at any point, however you want. And then you can either have it automated by having your main skill have a life cost, or you can recast it whenever its duration's expiring. Which I would imagine you're going to want to avoid, because if it's 78 life at level 1, that probably means that it's going to be like 2000 at the very least on level 20. I would imagine at the very least. So this is why you want to bypass it, right? Like, it's going to be a lot. They're going to look for you to, like, keep the buff up rather than keep recasting the buff, considering it's got a 6-second duration base, which is really large. 200, guys, no. Again, this is like Blood Rage. The life cost of it, the reason why this line is here is so that people actually use blood magic sources and turn their ability that they're inflicting the corrupting blood with into a life-costing skill. Otherwise, I mean, it would be free. Like, if this only costs like 500 life, I would just, there's no way that it's less than 500. Then yeah, you just recast it every, you're probably going to have a lot of base duration scaling for this build, however you look at it. And they're probably adding bleed duration scaling on the tree, because they said that they're reworking these nodes, right? So that probably won't affect this, but at the very least, you'd have to cast it every 10 seconds for like 500 life. That's nothing. You would never turn your build into a life-based one unless you've got additional benefits from it, which you could, but yeah. And I mean, it being a life cost has some benefits to it as well, the same way Dark Pact did, right? It's more than 1,000, but no more than 2,000. I think it's going to be a large number. But yeah, either way, it doesn't really matter. Since no matter how you look at it, it should be 3 times less for the refresh, and they're adding a support gem, which could be good. I mean, I have to take a look at it. But this seems very strong. But again, its base damage into endgame, like the level 20 gem could just absolutely suck dick, right? It could be just terrible. We don't know.
Time to stack on
but it
enemies.
looks very promising. It's interesting for sure.
The Exsanguinate skill shoots tendrils of blood in front of you at the cost of life rather than mana. Reap conjures a...
Wait, that's it? That's all they talk about? Releases several tendrils of blood from your character, targeting enemies at a narrow angle in front of you. The beams deal physical damage and inflict a physical damage over time debuff to enemies, which can stack up to 3 times. Effects which allow skills to chain can apply to these tendrils. Spell chaining physical duration. Fires tendrils at up to 7 targets. Level 12 deals 13 to 19 physical damage. Deals 18 base physical damage per second? Base duration is 1 second. Modifiers to spell damage applies to the skills damage over time. Fires tendrils at up to 7 targets. But can it fire 7 tendrils at a single target?
One target to the next.
Man, this looks OP too. I'm not gonna lie. The low level gem, it looks really strong. Spell chaining physical duration. It doesn't have an AoE tag. It's 0.8 of a second cast time. It's got crit. And the added damage effectiveness is 150%.
You can also support Exsanguinate so that its tendrils chain from one.
I mean, he's clearly using chain on this, right?
To the next. Reap.
I don't know. Mechanically, it seems very odd.
The Exsanguinate skill shoots.
Like, it kind of reaches far,
of blood
but then everything's in front. Like, he's only hitting in a cone. But then this guy got hit right now.
In addition to a strong physical damage hit, it also applies a physical damage over time debuff, which can stack up to 3 times. You can also support Exsanguinate so that its tendrils chain from one target to the next. Reap was strong.
I mean, it's very short duration. It's like very short length. But the damage on it looks good. And I mean, the length is kind of increased because he's using chain.
The Exsanguinate skill shoots tendrils of blood in front of you at the cost of life rather than mana.
Yeah, no matter what, I mean, these like bleed. I mean, it's not bleed, but like physical damage over time spells are cool. Like I've been wanting that for the longest time. You guys remember when I was talking about Steel Brand and stuff like that, you know, where with it being like a bleed spell, it's pretty fucking cool. And I mean, I like spells, so shit. It's like a spell that you scale on the bottom part of the skill tree and then itemize around spell damage. It's very unique. It's gonna be fucking annoying on int though. Rarely do you ever run into builds that need more int.
In addition,
you love dots? Also, yes, I do love dots.
Strong physical damage hit. It also applies.
The problem that I have with the Corrupting Blood one is that it's boring. You know, it seems really strong if the damage numbers match up the latter parts of the game, but it's really boring. It's just the attack that you would normally be using that's already probably available in the game, like something like Bull Lightning, but instead it puts a dawn on the target now instead of hitting, and it's like it could be strong, but you're still playing Bull Lightning, right? Like nothing is different. Yeah. So that's kind of boring, but this one's really interesting. I mean, I don't know, with the bull, you know, with the Corrupting Blood, it could enable abilities that just don't work anymore. Like I mean, the damage is so high. Fucking put it on Stormbrand, shit. Yeah, I have to see the support gem. Damn.
It's a physical damage
that looks
over time
cool.
debuff, which can stack up to 3 times. You can also support Exsanguinate so that its tendrils chain from one target to the next.
I mean, even like sources of global damage over time scaling would be very powerful. And using something like fucking fire trap spell damage spamming. I don't know. Shit.
Reap conjures a giant
it's like a
bloody
full screen
scythe that
AoE
swings
anyway.
across a selected area, applying strong hit damage and physical damage over time. Each use of the skill causes it to gain a charge that scales its damage up and increases its life cost up to 5 times. These charges drop off over time as well as after killing enemies, making Reap very powerful at stacking up damage against single targets.
Alright, let's see. A blood scythe swipes across a selected area, applying a physical damage. Oh, it's over a selected area. It looks like it's coming out of the guy, but he's actually...
Reap conjures a giant bloody scythe that swings across
so weird because it looks... Does he have like...
selected area.
Does he have spell cascade or something? I'm so confused. Applying a physical damage over time debuff in addition to hitting enemies with a physical damage. Blood size swipes across a selected area, applying a physical damage over time debuff in addition to hitting enemies with physical damage. If enemies survive, you gain a blood charge, which raises the damage and cost of the skill. Deal 58 to 87 physical damage, which is really high at level 28. Deals 120 base physical damage per second. How does that compare to Vortex? 106. This does 120. And like pretty much nothing lives for even a second with Vortex at this point without like elemental overload or anything. Base duration is 1 second. Modifiers to spell damage applied to skills damage over time. Costs 20% more life per blood charge. The cost is 25 life. Deals 10% more damage per blood charge. Oh, poggers. In a blood charge, if the skill hits enemies and none of them die. Lose a blood charge when an enemy dies while affected by the skill's debuff. Man. So he is using Spell Cascade, right?
Applying strong
but it is
damage and
it's like a selected area. I thought that it was around the character, but he's actually selecting where he's clicking. And he's just using Spell Cascade. Man, I wonder what the base AoE is. This seems rather large. But this is... I mean, it's a Marauder, right? Yeah, it's definitely a Marauder. Because he's like igniting also. And the fact that you can play this paired up with Ignite and with Poison is so interesting. With so much like scaling for that. I don't understand the life cost. How no. Do we have skills that have life cost as like their mana cost? There's really nothing, right? Like Dark Pact just depletes a number from your thing, right? Like how do mana multipliers work with this? Like what's a mana multiplier? I mean, it says mana multiplier and life cost is not a mana multiplier. If the life cost is there, then I would imagine it isn't multiplicative with the supports. Which is why, like, yeah, why Blood Magic support has such a high cost. Like mana multiplier to it. But it also says mana multiplier. Yeah, no, that would make sense in the case of this. Because this applies to the gem before it gets converted to a life spender. What am I to say? This thing looks really strong too. I mean, all of them look really strong. If you like dot builds, we're gaming, baby. We are gamers.
Making Reap very powerful at stacking up.
Reap looks the strongest. I think the Corrupting Blood looks the strongest. I mean, yeah, the Tentacle one is mechanically ambiguous, you know? It's hard to tell. And this one's a little mechanically ambiguous too. But also, it's the one that's damage numbers look the worst when it comes to being a level 1 gem, right? Like when you first get it, which is why I'm starting to suspect that the damage numbers look really good on those gems early game, and then the level 20 gems will not look very good damage wise. But hey, who knows? We'll see.
We've also
We're gonna get the gems before release.
That have split the existing Blood Magic support into 2 separate support gems. The first of these is the Arrogance support, which causes supported skills to reserve life instead of mana, and also provides an increase to the effect of auras that it supports. Just like the original Blood Magic support gem, the reservation multiplier diminishes as the gem levels up.
Okay. Again. Arrogance support, cost and reservation multiplier, 220%. Support skills have 10% increased aura effect. Support skills reserve life instead of mana. Man, is everything going to be cost and reservation multiplier now? Because if that's the case, then these dot builds would have like a huge drawback. If everything gets changed into this, or if it's just the Arrogance one, then that would make sense why the damage numbers are so high. I mean, people are saying aura buffs. This really isn't much of an aura buff because if you're playing like a real aura build, you don't have sockets for this. This doesn't enable you to fit in another aura if you're already playing low life. The aura effect is negligible considering that you probably have like 300 or 400 on your build already. And then, yeah, you simply just cannot there's not enough auras for you to use in the first place. And then, yeah, you just don't have the sockets for this. So realistically, if you were using blood magic before, you will use this as, if you're using the blood magic support, then you will use this and it's going to be slightly stronger. But it's not the sort of thing that you can just like slap into your build and, you know, change things up. It's like, this is it. It's like 10 aura effect on a single aura and you're done, pretty much. Unless you're using like flats for exactly 50%. But even then, that comes at a drawback because, yeah, you don't have to go as low on your life anymore, you know? You can have 50% life, which has its benefits too.
Magic support gem, the reservation multiple.
It's a good thing that they did it.
Support gem causes supported skills to cost life instead of mana. Once you've consumed a certain amount of life to use a skill, you gain life tap, which increases your damage for a few seconds. Okay, so that's what this was. This is what I was thinking of. Custom reservation multiplier 200%. Supports any skill. Support skills cost life instead of mana. Gain life tap after spending 17 life. With a support skill. Support skills deal 20% more damage while you have life tap. Life tap lasts 4 seconds. See, so I don't quite get how this is mandatory. And also, now that I think about it, would increased duration being attached to... Would increased duration being attached to corrupting fever even increase the duration of the secondary corrupting blood debuff, letting you inflict? So I think the duration scaling would be this, but the damage scaling... No, everything would be on this. But there's a difference because the base duration comes from this gem, but the base secondary duration comes from the hit. So I'm not quite sure what I'm even linking. Hits to apply
so weird.
Single targets.
I don't know. I'm sure we'll figure it out.
We've also added 2. First of these is the arrogance support, which causes supports.
Do we even have enough supports for this? I mean, it's physical damage, right? So wouldn't like stuff like brutality work? More physical damage. So like brutality works. Efficacy works. Controlled destruction works. I mean, anything that applies increased damage received by the enemy works. So stuff like, I think hypothermia would probably work. Deadly ailments work. Swift affliction probably works. Less duration would work. Increased duration would work. Pride would work, yeah. It's not an ailment. I mean, I feel like that's enough. Brutality is obviously, like, huge. I feel like I'm forgetting some, like, melee gem. Yeah, Flesh and Stone would work too. Damage in full life. I don't remember what they ended up changing it to. Supported attack skills deal more damage while in full life. See, this would work if you're using an attack skill and if you're scaling the buff gem and if you're scaling the damage of the attack and not the damage of the buff, which I don't quite understand which one you're doing. I'm sure we're gonna get more footage. Yeah, Maim would work too. So yeah, support any skill that hits enemies. Support skills deal 20% more damage with hits. 10% increased effect of cruelty granted by supported skills. Hits from supported skills grant cruelty. This gem doesn't explain anything. What?
Which increased seconds.
It's like a 4-second duration on cruelty, but they don't actually explain. How can a skill gem not explain what the fucking buff that it grants does? GGG, please. Can't it just say like cruelty is blah 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 down here? Like, I don't understand what this does. And yeah, I mean, this is a regular non-HP related thing, so everything is cost and reservation multipliers. Then hold alt, yeah. I mean, they say what it does, but they don't show any of the numbers. Which is like, yeah, we don't know the scalability of it at all or what it like even starts off with. But yeah, this is unrelated to life cost. And its cost and reservation multiplier is 130. So I think the reason why these dot builds have such insanely high damage is because the level 20 gems do scale well, but it will cost a lot of life for you to do it through a spell. Like a lot, which is kind of painful because if you're playing a dot build, you have very few means of like recovering your HP, you know? So I think that's basically the trade-off for how these work, which is also why Chris earlier said, but be careful, you know? I think you have to scale the hit to a certain extent. And you essentially can gain like free overleech now, considering if you can benefit from the spell damage, which you can. So you're low life. So it's like fucking 6 different mechanics overlapping. So you're killing yourself and your HP is half, but then you can still have energy shield and overleech your HP while simultaneously just leeching your ES. So, what the fuck? And with things like Corrupted Soul, your HP, even though it's only ever half, is still full, which then works. So it's not like 10%, it's still the full 20%. Pretty nutty, but if you can get it running, granted, again, for the 150th time, if the gem numbers are there when we get the gems in a couple days, supports attack skills cannot support triggered skills which create minions, or skills used by totems, traps, or mines. Okay, so there's no real exceptions here. Supported attack skills deal added physical damage with weapons equal to 2% of maximum life while on low life. Supported attacks deal 10% more life. It's level 31. And again, we don't know what it scales. Supported attacks deal added physical damage with weapons equal to 2% of maximum life while on low life. I mean, it's potentially a lot, but in what realistic scenario can you like do enough with this? Like you can get it, you can make it so that it gives you a lot of damage, but like it's not the sort of damage that you can't get from elsewhere. And the downside, it's pretty severe. 8k life equals 160 flat. Yeah, but 8k life equals 4k life on an attack-based build. You know? That's the bigger problem. Yeah, that is level 1 though. Yeah, it could be that. I think only the more damage part scales, to be fair. And it probably doesn't scale that high either. Like, it's either 24 or 29% more damage. So like, it's not that simple to bypass the issues of this. Corrupted Soul bypasses everything. Because I'm not getting it wrong, right? You can still have energy shield. Like, all of that still works. Or am I like forgetting something where it's like you cannot use energy shield or something? Because the energy shield part, I don't know. I feel like we've become too reliant on all of these like hybrid sort of setups, and this further like dips into it, you know? Because you have your total HP. And people were running builds like that. Like literally 4k life, 5k energy shield sort of builds, and they're very strong. You can still overleech it with the maximum amount of HP. I mean, I guess you kind of feel stupid for putting points into life, but life is damage. The same way you would feel stupid for over producing mana on an MOM build. But in the case of Archmage, that turns into damage, so it makes sense. And the end result is the same. You deplete your resource, you're dead. I don't know. It seems really strong. All of this seems really, really like mechanically strong. And it introduces interesting archetypes too. I like it a lot. I mean, again, unless the level 20 gems are absolute shit, I am very impressed with these gems.
Alongside a Val-themed expansion,
like probably the best added like set of gems that we've ever had. With maybe Brands being the second best or first best. It's pretty close between them. Brands were really revolutionary, but they were kind of broken in their design and oversimplified. Well, these are quite complex and yeah, require some thought. I can't wait to be like completely wrong on all these things.
Is that you now get...
Overall, to summarize, yet again, GGG has really impressed me with just about everything. I mean, especially with the Bay class, Rory was super open. Chris said a couple cool things, you know. But the actual content, very cool. I'm looking forward to Ultimatum. I think Ultimatum is going to be a real spicy league for me. I do hope that the challenge is there. The way Rory was talking about it was, I don't know. It seemed like on average, it won't be that challenging. But then the 10 wave thing seemed pretty accessible. And then that's got like a big special surprise mini boss potentially sort of thing. I'm not quite sure how that works. But the mechanic itself seems really interesting. Hope it's not going to be tedious in the first stages. That's probably my biggest concern. But when I asked Rory about it, he was like, oh yeah, the first stages are really quick. So It shouldn't be too annoying until you get to like the juicy stuff. The gems, probably like my favorite thing that they've released in terms of gems being reworked and gems being improved and whatnot. Very cool. The unique item changes have a lot of potential. Obviously, I love giving power to uniques. Bringing in uniques from different leagues into the core game, super cool. Stuff like the Golem Amulet or Soul Rest, very, very cool. Or even Delirium stuff. Just there's so many cool uniques that are currently super gated for SSF that hopefully no longer will be. You know, all the system reworks, very interesting. I mean, it's extra spicy on the incursion in my case in particular. I'm really looking forward to it. The Vol Reliquary is kind of cool. I hope that I hope that I'll find something, at least one thing. You know, get a Xerfe's Heart. Go crazy, dude. Why not? The 2 new uniques that they showed were pretty interesting. I mean, the shield's kind of, I don't know. I gotta think about it more. It's some fucking weird ass EB build, and then the Glimpse of Chaos is just a straight up banger for all my Hierophant needs. So hell yeah, let's go, dude. Yeah, all around, super interesting stuff. Really looking forward to this one. I don't tend to get hyped up about League mechanics, but when it's paired up with this many like core game changes, I can't help but get excited for playing some Cremation. Honkers.